Did you make me co-host?
You are co-host.
Okey-doke.
Megan is host. And I am toast.
Okay. Oops. Okay. Let's see.
Oh, Megan, did you see Bonnie's chat? Her mic appears to be broken.
Okay.
Bonnie, can you hear us?
I'm just gonna keep trying.
We can barely
Oh,
hear
yeah.
you.
Hear
Do you
me
need to turn your
now?
volume up somehow? Oh, I thought I had my video on.
Testing, testing. Testing.
We can hear you, but barely.
Can you guys hear me at all?
Yep,
Yes.
just then, even better. It's turned on, but doesn't appear to be picking up my sound for you. I tested and it's fine on my end. Huh. Can you talk again as like loud without yelling? Yeah, we're not hearing anything. Do you have video, Bonnie? Okay. Megan or Pam, did we hear of anyone else who was not going to be able to attend this evening?
The only that I heard as not attending are Ruby and Joanne.
Okay.
Peggy just joined. Let me.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, I just heard you.
Yay! Okay, good. That was a fun ride. Every time Windows updates, my entire sound system falls apart for reasons I don't understand.
It's because it's Microsoft. There's no reason. There's no reason for anything that happens with Microsoft.
It's true.
Okay.
It's true.
Okay, we have 5.
See. Watch attendees. All right. So it being 6:04 on Wednesday, March 16th, 2022, I call to order this meeting of the Brockton Conservation Commission. In keeping with the governor's emergency order that allows remote meetings through July of this year in response to the COVID pandemic, this meeting is being held remotely via Zoom. People participating from the public will be acknowledged if they raise their hands at the time that the chair, that's me, is recognizing members of the public. Participants in particular hearings will be let into the Zoom meeting as panelists so that they can present and discuss. So if you want to speak, you raise your hand. If you are calling in, it is *9 on your phone. Okay, the first item on the agenda is review and approval of meeting minutes. Did everyone have a chance to go through the minutes? Do I have a motion to accept?
Sparks here. I make a motion to accept the meeting minutes from April.
Do we have a second?
I second.
I think you meant February.
Oh, February. Sorry. What-
Do we have a second?
I second.
And I think Bikler inverse. All in favor, Danielson, aye.
Sparks, aye.
Erdis, aye.
Equal.
Morris, aye.
Motion passes. The next item on the agenda was Wetlands Protection Ordinance Draft Update. Megan, do we want to move that to the end of the meeting?
Sure, we can do that since I know Stephanie, you won't have to recuse yourself at the end. So if you'll be here, we can move it to the end. Mhm.
Okay, that sounds good. Okay. Then, let's see. The next item is a request for a certificate of compliance for 15 Leach Avenue. And do we have someone here for that?
Looks like we have Matt from Holmgren's office.
Oh, did I say that right? I skipped over 10 Father Kenny Way.
Kenny Way is.
Oh,
first.
okay.
Yes,
Oh,
I'm
good.
sorry.
Okay, if the representatives for the Council on Aging could raise their hands. I'm trying to go through the names. I don't recognize anyone as being from the Council on Aging.
Okay. Then Megan, do you want to go through your report, please?
Yes, so. Okay, so this was the certificate of compliance for the parking expansion at the Council on Aging at 10 Father Kenny Way. I conducted a site inspection February 25th, which was sort of between our last two snowstorms so that I could see the pavement and so on. Based on my review, the as-built and the site conditions seem to match the proposed or the approved site plan. The one difference I noted was that what was approved as a 10 by 12 shed on sonotubes has been replaced by an 11 by 15 foot shed on a gravel bed and what was being called railroad ties. I since followed up with the engineers and the contractor, and they confirmed that they are not reclaimed railroad ties. They're just, 4x4 pieces of wood, from the hardware store, from the lumber yard. So they're, I guess whoever did the survey size-wise thought they might be railroad ties, but they said they're not. They're new pieces of wood. So that was the only difference I noted. So the shed is a bit larger, but it is within their limit of work, as was approved. I noted as part of their continuing condition, they were required to put up snow storage signs along the western property boundary. It does look like they did that. I did see the signs. There wasn't much snow left the time I went out there, it looks like based on the snow that was left, they're storing snow along that western boundary and also next to the shed. So that would be my best guess of where they're putting the snow. But overall, it looks like what was built matches the approved plan. So I would recommend, with a certificate of compliance, I would just recommend that the ongoing conditions, E1, E2, and E3 be issued, with E3 being the snow storage signs, and then E1 and E2 being the pesticides and not storing like gas and so on over 5 gallons in the shed.
Any of the commissioners have any questions?
So Sparks here, I have just one question for Megan. Do you suspect any issues with additional snow storage over by that shed area? Like, is that actually a thing to be concerned about, or would it not really impact anything of concern?
So the compensatory flood storage they added is more on the eastern side by the building itself. It didn't look like they're storing snow in the compensatory storage, which is good because that's also part of it is their stormwater controls. So it's preferable that they're not doing that, and it looks like they're not. The area next to the shed is technically still floodplain. It's probably the farthest corner from the riverfront than the rest of that southern boundary, but it is technically, I think it's technically still in the floodplain, not in the riverfront, would be next to the shed.
And so that you did see storage there when you were there. Should there be
Yeah.
no word that you use, like a
Yeah, if you wanted to modify condition, I believe condition E3 was specific to the labeling of the snow storage area. If you wanted to amend that to also say no snow will be stored anywhere but that labeled area, I think that would be consistent with the intention of that condition.
Okay, thank you. And that's all from me.
Okay, anyone else? Megan, I just have one question, and it's kind of the wrong time of year, but how did the bioretention cell look?
I was able to confirm that the woody plantings were in. At this time, they were not leafed out to confirm their condition, but I could confirm that the woody plantings were in the bioretention area.
And they're healthy. They didn't die over the winter. And
They had persistent, they would have been planted probably the past growing season, so they've probably had a growing season already. So assuming, if they had died, they probably wouldn't still be persisting as the way they look now. They didn't look
Yeah.
freshly planted. So
Yeah.
I would
But-
expect they're persistent, but again, I can't be 100% sure without seeing.
but they look like they
were.
were still alive.
Yeah, they were clearly planted, not, they weren't planted and died immediately. They clearly weren't like planted this winter
Yeah.
and didn't thrive. They're clearly there and persistent, but I can't say any more than that.
Okay. All right, do I have a motion to issue a certificate of compliance?
I move
Sparks
to,
here. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Bonnie.
Sparks here. I'll make a motion to issue the certificate of compliance with the, what's the word, please, from our agent?
Ongoing
Continuing,
conditions?
yeah.
With the ongoing conditions outlined by the agent.
Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, before we vote, I would suggest maybe an amendment that we include an inspection on, or a report on the health of the plant matter in the bioretention cell this spring, maybe May timeframe.
And would that be still part of a complete certificate of compliance, or would the commission like to issue a partial?
I'm okay, in fact, so I meant it to do an inspection, but also that any dead plant material be replanted. And I would be okay with a full certificate of compliance.
Sparks here, I agree with that. And also we are including that additional amendment for the snow storage, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the motion as amended?
So moved.
Second,
Second, Boris,
all in favor, Danielson, I.
Sparks, aye.
Boris, aye.
Curtis, I.
Declara.
Do I have a motion to, okay. So as accepted, now a vote on the motion. Danielson, I.
Sparks, aye.
Curtis, I.
Boris, aye.
Declara.
Motion passes. The next item on the agenda is a request for certificate of compliance for 15 Leach Avenue. And do we have someone?
J.K. Holmgren's office.
Okay. Matt, would you?
Yeah, I'm here. You guys ready for me?
Yes, we are. Thank you.
All right. So last time this was in front of the board, you had some concerns with the stone that was around the building. So that has been since removed. That's no longer there. And the other requests that we had were to have the calcs for the two drainage areas. So I believe Scott emailed those to you, Megan, as I was told.
Yes, he did
Okay.
email them to me today.
Okay, awesome.
So I guess the question is, Megan, have you had time to look at them and do they make sense to you?
I did look at them, so they make sense in the sense that I think as we expected, the net fill on the site is greater than the net fill that was shown on the cut and fill table on the approved plan. That being said, the new table is also showing that the net cut, both from the rear yard and the compensatory storage areas, are also higher than the cut that was shown on the previous table. So in both cases, the net cut is exceeding the net fill by a similar amount. In which case, it doesn't match the calculations as was approved, but it would match the intention in the case of having the compensatory area exceed the fill area in this case.
Okay, and then I'm sorry, Matt, you mentioned the stone around.
Yeah, they had like a 1 foot little gravel around the foundation of the house. So that was removed.
And that was adjacent to the kind of retaining. Was it a retaining wall or stone wall?
No, it wasn't a wall at all. It was just like a 1 inch little bed of gravel.
This was the one, because we don't have a photo here. All I have is the PDF of the
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah,
But
well,
this
this
is a
was,
house-
yeah,
this was-
it was
yeah, it was
from
like
the
a
last
house.
meeting, yeah.
Oh, I wasn't at the last.
I
meeting, sorry.
know, I know. So at the last meeting, we did confirm the stone was taken out as of the last meeting.
Yeah.
So yes, the stone, previously it was the whole backyard had been covered with crushed stone, and
Yep.
they were asked to take that out, and we confirmed at the last meeting that they did take it out
Okay.
and replace it with sod.
Okay. All right, Megan, is it your recommendation that the board issue the certificate of compliance?
Based on, yeah, that was the last concern at the last meeting, was seeing the cut and fill. Ultimately, my concern was that the fill volume had exceeded the cut volume. Based on this table, the cut volume still exceeds the fill volume. So based on that, that would address my concern that the numbers weren't going to work out.
Okay, do I have a motion to issue the certificate of compliance?
Are there any ongoing conditions for this one, Megan?
Yes, it's just E1, which is the herbicides and no herbicides and pesticides.
I move to accept the condition of compliance.
We have a second?
I'll second the motion.
All in favor, Danielson, aye?
Curtis, I.
Boris, I.
Sparks, aye.
Declara.
Motion passes. The next item on the agenda is a notice of intent for 219 Bellevue Avenue. And this is the after the fact filing.
Yes.
And Megan, when we spoke last week, nothing, you still hadn't received anything on this.
No, I haven't received anything on this.
So,
I just wanted to say, I don't actually have this one in my drive folder. You said Bellevue
Right,
Ave?
yeah, there was nothing to share, so there,
Okay.
yeah, there's nothing.
Okay,
yeah,
very good.
right.
I'm not missing anything. Excellent.
Don't have anything either.
Right, so basically this was a yard expansion and accessory structures that were placed in the buffer zone. And also in the resource area, Megan, or we don't even know if
I
at this
sus-
point.
We don't know for sure. I think it's certainly possible, given the extent of the yard expansion, just by, rough measurements. I think it's possible. What we had been waiting on is a follow-up on the current delineation, because the current delineation for this NOI shows the BVW boundary pretty much following the limit of disturbance, which is, suggests that maybe the original delineation could have been buried, particularly because the original delineation was up to 80 feet up gradient from what's being shown as the current line. So it seems unlikely that, in less than 10 years, the BVW line would have retreated 80 feet. So I believe the last time we heard this, the request was, follow up on that line, soil logs and so on, to make sure that we're accounting for basically the soils under the yard. I don't know how much fill might have been brought in to, do that yard expansion, but I assume they at least loamed it back there before putting the grass in. So taking a look under the grass and under the loam and seeing if there's hydric soils that would support the original delineation line and support the fact that the expansion likely could have encroached into the BVW.
Matt, have you had any communications with your client?
I have not. I talked to Scott early about this today, and he was expecting it to get continued. So,
Okay, well, this has been continued multiple times. Megan, can you refresh, when was this first brought to the commission's attention?
The NOI, I believe, was filed and we heard it. It was probably the September meeting.
So at this point, what are our options? You and I had talked a bit about this. And I think what we talked about was maybe tabling the NOI and reissuing the enforcement order and the requirements for wetland and 25-foot restoration and or evaluation to see exactly where the wetland line is supposed to be today, because it is unlikely that the wetland line changed 80 feet or that it was 80 feet of difference due to inaccuracies in the original delineation.
Right. Yeah, so I think, yeah, the options, the three options are another continuance, tabling and reissuing the enforcement order, which states that plans should be submitted to the commission showing restoration of the 25-foot in any resource areas. So that covers what we've already discussed in the sense that we need to be certain of the delineation and we need to see a restoration for any deviation due to the filling, presumably the clearing and filling. The other option would be to deny based on, insufficient information to draw a conclusion. In terms of practicality and the difference, because it's an after the fact NOI, to be honest, I don't know if there's too much of a practical difference between denying and tabling. If it's tabled, there will still be, rerunning the legal ad, re-notifying the abutters. The same way as if it was denied and they refiled, it would be the same thing. Reopen the hearing, re-notify abutters, run the legal ad. So I think.
And if we made, if the board voted to deny it, would we then issue a second enforcement order as well? Because I don't want the applicant to think, oh, they denied it, so what, we don't care, because that seems to be the attitude anyway. They haven't come forward, they haven't seem to move forward with what needs to be done to rectify the situation.
Yeah, right. So I would say if the vote was to deny rather than table, denying it would, deny the NOI, and the NOI is to get approval for the yard expansion. So if the commission wanted to deny that and then issue another enforcement order, the commission could have the option of issuing an enforcement order and just specify that the commission wants a restoration plan, like that, they don't, if the commission doesn't want to see this NOI again and just wants to go straight to, provide us a plan showing restoration and anything that was done unpermitted is going to get taken out, that's another way to do it as well, because by my understanding, if we issue an enforcement order requiring a restoration plan, they then don't need to file a notice of intent. They can do the restoration work under the restoration plan that is submitted in response to the enforcement order.
Okay. And kind of the upside and downside of that is if they submit, if we continue under a notice of intent and get to an order of conditions, that gets recorded. Whereas the enforcement order generally doesn't get recorded.
No, enforcement orders don't get, as part of the process, they don't get recorded by the applicant.
Right. So we need something, and Joyce, I do see your hand raised. So we don't really have something that to kind of hold over their heads, even at some point into the future, where an outstanding order of conditions at least encumbers the title of the property if they were to refinance or sell. Joyce?
So the notice, I'm just a little bit confused because it seems like if it's a notice of, an after the fact notice of intent, that means that they submitted the notice of intent after the work had been done. Is that correct? So, okay, so it just seems confusing that you would ask for a notice of intent when it's already done but I understand now that you said that about the long-term prospect of holding them accountable.
And it is also, it's a mechanism for the applicant as well to get proper permitting for parts of the project that can be properly permitted. So for example, you know, they expanded their backyard, expanded their accessory structures. Depending on where they are, they maybe could keep, you know, one of the sheds and keep some of the yard up to what the commission would have approved as the limit of work. The idea being that they keep, you know, what they did up to the approved limit of work, and then they restore everything beyond what would have been approved. So it's a twofold for the commission. It's a way to get something on record,
Mhm.
recorded in terms of the order of conditions, and then it's also a way for the applicant to properly permit the work that is permittable.
Okay.
It
thank you.
also, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Joyce.
Oh, thank you. That's fine.
It also kind of is a double hit because one, they're already in violation. And if they submit a notice of intent and they are able to work through to the point where the commission issues an order of conditions, and then they don't proceed with that, technically they're in violation of the order of conditions because that is work that needs to be done to bring them in compliance with the enforcement order.
And this is Sparks here, and I just want to just state that I defer to the chair here on this because I think we have the same goals. I would like the property owners to be held accountable and to have to repair the damage, but I am not personally sure of the best way to go about doing that. So I defer to Stephanie with your recommendation on how to best proceed here.
Well, so again, thinking through it, I think if we denied it, basically that's denying everything. And maybe that will get their attention because again, they're in violation. And as long as we then immediately issue a second enforcement order with the requirement as Megan laid out, that they submit a plan for restoration. I also want that to include an assessment of the amount of fill and alteration that's been done on the site, that they need to contract with a wetland scientist. I don't know if we asked for that in with the first enforcement order, but
Pull up.
I looked it up and it started in November. That's when Megan made her recommendations. And I do not see the fill that you're talking about in those recommendations.
Okay, so I can read. So the requirements, so when the first enforcement order was issued, the specific requirements were that 1, a professional land surveyor should be consulted to confirm the property boundaries relative to the unpermitted work. 2, a professional wetland scientist, environmental scientist shall be consulted to delineate the wetland resource areas and document alterations to wetland resource areas to date. And 3, and this is where the notice of intent came in, was 3, a notice of intent application shall be prepared and submitted to the commission for all work conducted beyond the approved limit of work under the previous order. This NOI shall also include any restoration mitigation work to address unpermitted alterations to any wetland resource areas or the 25-foot buffer zone.
okay, so that has all of that covered. I am inclined to suggest issuing a denial with the follow-up enforcement order that reiterates everything that was in the previous order.
Can I say so moved to that?
You can. Do we
Sparks
have a
here.
second?
Second, Voris,
All in favor? Danielson, I.
Sparks, aye.
Voris, aye.
Curtis, I.
Spikeler,
And maybe we can put some strong language in the notification of the denial that we do not appreciate being ignored.
Stephanie, just a housekeeping, technically, because this was an NOI hearing, we did need to.
Oh, we need to close
check
the
for-
hearing.
Check for public comment and close the
Yes.
hearing.
Okay, and, okay. Were there any members of the public? So we are going to step back and redo this for anybody who's interested. Any members of the public here that wish to speak on this item? Okay, I don't see any hands raised. Bonnie, if you'd make that motion again
We have
to issue a
close the
denial.
hearing.
Motion to-
Close the
motion to
hearing. I'm
close the
sorry.
hearing.
We'll just keep a vicious circle. A motion to close the hearing, please.
Sparks here, motion to close this hearing.
Second,
Voris,
Curtis,
favor?
I.
all in favor, Danielson, I.
Sparks, aye.
Voris,
Curtis,
aye.
I.
Spikeler,
Motion passes. Okay, a motion to issue a denial. Immediately followed by a second enforcement order with all the requirements outlined in the initial enforcement order. Do I have such a motion?
Sparks here, so moved.
Second,
Voris, second.
all in favor, Danielson, I.
Sparks, aye.
Voris, aye.
Curtis, I.
Spikeler,
Motion passes. Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda is a notice of intent for 940 Belmont Street. Matt, do you have an update for us? I
No,
understand.
I don't. I was gonna ask for a continuance for this as well.
Okay, and to what date?
What's the date of the next meeting?
It's the third Wednesday of the month.
I believe it's
Alright.
April
20th.
20th.
Sorry, I should know this by now.
No,
Yeah, that's fine. April 20th works.
do I have a motion to continue the hearing to April 20th?
Sparks
I make
here.
a,
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
go ahead. I make a motion to continue to April 20th.
Do I have a second?
Voris, second.
All in favor, Danielson, I.
Sparks, aye.
Voris, aye.
Curtis, I.
Spikeler,
Motion passes. The next item on the agenda, 14 Athens Drive.
All right, I have a plan for this one for you guys. Do you want me to share my screen?
Yes, please.
Okay.
And Megan, was this plan submitted in time for you to be able to review it? I think it was on the drive, right?
Yes, I did have time to update my report.
But yes, Matt, if you want to
Oh,
share your screen.
Sorry. I didn't know I had to hit the button. All right. Does that work?
Yep,
All right, so from my understanding, I don't have the comments in front of me, I believe, from the last meeting. Let's see. Yeah, but Scott handed me this plan basically saying that all of the comments have been addressed. That's what the orange highlighter is. That's why it looks that way. So one of them was the silt sock needed to be shown. Now, as you can see, if you follow my cursor, it's all along the back over here, follows that fence line just on the outside of it, tucks into the back of the garage. Along with that, the fence has been moved. I believe before it was an odd shaped, it followed the tree line more, and it was requested that it kind of been squared off, make a little bit more sense. So we squared the fence off, heading back towards the corner of the garage. The one more, so there's going to be utilities going from the house to the proposed pool house. The pool house is going to be on sonotubes. And the proposed utilities are right here. And as you can follow this line, this is going to be going to a underground propane tank. And the stockpile area is shown up here along with the dewatering basin with a sill sock around it. Then we have Brad's planting plan shown right here. So these are all the type of shrubs that are going to be going in. So we got, I'm not sure on the total, but yeah, I think 6, 20. So we got 32 plants going in.
Okay.
And if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask.
Megan, do you want to go through your report, please?
So this plan, I think at this point, it addresses my comments from the previous report. They did square off the fence compared to where it was. It's still, you can see in the northeast corner, it still goes in and back out again, but it's at least more practical than what was proposed before, both in terms of installation and then doing maintenance of the lawn on the inside going forward. I think the planting plan is appropriate compared to just passive restoration because it is lawn currently. So I think it will help with the restoration to get some woody plantings in there rather than just leaving the grass going forward. In terms of the rest of the comments that they're shown on the plan, it does seem like a lot of sonotubes for a pool house that size, but presuming that, when they go to pull their building permit, if they confirm that they are indeed putting it on sonotubes, then I guess that's the case. So based on that, my comments have been addressed. I would recommend that for issuing an order of conditions, in addition to our standard special conditions, I would recommend some additional special conditions, mostly related to the restoration area. So I recommend that once the order is issued, there will be no more mowing of the lawn past the approved limit of work, what's going to be the fence line. So pretty much as soon as this is issued, any mowing going forward will need to be within the existing approved lawn. And then a couple conditions related to monitoring of the buffer zone restoration area, including timing that the plantings shall all be in by November 15th. I know that's kind of a big window, but I think I picked November 15th based on the assumption that some of these plantings are better suited as fall plantings. If the commission thinks otherwise and wants to push it up to, a spring date for the plantings and as a special condition, they can do so. My reason for recommending November was just to allow for fall planting if deemed more appropriate for these species. And then, the conditions related to receiving a monitoring report prior to an issue of a partial, and then a final monitoring report after 3 years for the complete, and then a continuing condition that pool water shall not be discharged into the BVW or the buffer zone.
Okay, any comments from the
I do.
commissioners?
I have a question. I wanted to know if any pesticides or Grub-X or things like that used on the lawn would affect the buffer zone at all? Or is that the purpose of the buffer zone?
Well, generally, so just to add, when I say our standard special conditions, one of our standard special conditions is no pesticides or herbicides. That usually is always, it ends up being special condition E1 or the first condition under continuing conditions. So when we issue our standard conditions, unless it's specified otherwise, we always end up including a condition that they don't use pesticides or herbicides. So unless the applicant requests that they absolutely need them, and then it would be discussed, we would always assume that it's going to be conditioned that there won't be herbicides or pesticides
Thank
in the jurisdictional areas.
So Sparks here. So maybe I need to be enlightened in the ways of building permits, but considering how far the propane tank is from the source, it feels just like an excessive amount of underground gas line. And I mean, I don't know how far it needs to be from a building, but it's not that far from the garage. Like, I feel like we could reduce 25 feet of pipe. It just seems like a lot.
Matt, could you speak to that?
Yeah, I'm not sure off the top of my head if there's a specific reason why they moved it over there. I'm assuming it has to do with something with the distance from either the pool or the house.
But people
But-
have large propane above ground tanks located just outside their houses.
Yeah, I've seen that, and along with underground ones too that aren't too far away from houses. So I'm not sure if it might be something with the pool. I don't know the reason for them moving it over to that area.
So Bonnie, are you thinking you'd prefer to see it outside of the buffer zone completely?
I feel like it wouldn't be unreasonable to have it tucked up by the corner, the far corner of the pool, you know, on the outside of it. Because I mean, then you've got so much less piping. You've already got an open spot there where there's no hardscaping. So and there's less digging. There'd be less lawn destruction, and you'd have less underground gas piping. It's just, and you save money. There's less loss of,
Right.
you know, excessive materials. It just seems wasteful. I don't understand.
Any other comments?
How often does a propane tank have to be replaced or reused or refilled?
It all depends on the usage, and I mean, I'm assuming they're not going to really be using it for too much of heat. They probably won't be out there in the summer. I mean, in the winter, but I don't, maybe once or twice a year, maybe for something like that.
Is it for the purposes of heating the pool or heating the pool house?
The way it looks, it's tied into the house. I don't know if that has any correlation with them heating the pool. I don't know how that works.
Oh, I wonder if they're putting in like a wet sauna in that place, so they need to heat it and steam it.
Possibly, maybe. I'm not sure.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Yes,
I just wondered about the water discharge. I noticed that Megan had said something about the water discharge not being sent into the bordered wetlands. Exactly how would, because most times water does have to be removed towards winter time. How would that water be discharged? Because I see a driveway and a fence and a walkway. So how would that water be discharged?
So in the package, I believe that we sent Megan, the the filter that we have in the maintenance, it actually does not require it to be discharged. So when they're building the pool, if they do run into any problems where they need to dewater it, there's a dewatering area to the north side of the house that's surrounded by hay bales. That would be for short term, obviously.
Okay, so that's the dewatering basin?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, great. I thought that was for the actual installation of the pool.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's what I
Oh.
was thinking as
Yeah.
well.
okay, thank you. That's
Yeah, no
great.
problem.
So Matt, just to be clear, because that dewatering area would not be a permanent fixture.
Right.
I just want to be clear, so a pool, it's an in-ground pool.
Yep.
And it doesn't look like any test pits were done to determine the depth to groundwater. So I presumed, as Joyce did, that that was for dewatering during the installation of the pool.
Correct.
Okay, so if they needed to draw off water from the pool, they would have to set up a new dewatering area.
But yes, correct.
What's the?
They're
I'm
never
just-
gonna do that. They're just gonna dump
Right,
it over the
right.
edge. Let's be honest here.
Yeah, that,
We were told at the last meeting that this filter that they showed the specs for this meeting, we were told that with this filter, they don't need to discharge. So I think
Correct.
we're going off that if they're using this filter and we're told that this filter means they don't have to discharge, then we're assuming they don't need any discharge and so shouldn't be allowed to discharge.
Madam Chair, can I just say something as a person who has the pool?
you
No.
have this pool?
No, but I understand the filter. But there's a difference between whether or not you need to backwash the filter and then that one, they probably don't. But you do need to bring your
Rod,
down
right, and I think that,
when you
right,
close it. So there is water that will be discharged.
right. Thank you, Pam. Yes.
And I do believe too, even
I
if
think
there, if there's excessive rain even and there, you know, and the levels get really high, sometimes you even have to discharge, but
So I think that needs to be a condition that is that one of the suggested conditions, Megan, in your
Yes, it was
report?
one of my suggested conditions anyway, because my
Yes, yeah.
assumption was if they didn't need to discharge anyway, there's no harm in a condition saying that they
Yeah.
can't discharge. We can bump it up. I recommended no discharge into BBW, the 25-foot. If you wanted to bump that up, to no discharge in the buffer zone entirely, you could do that as well.
Yeah. All right, any other questions on any of the conditions suggested by Megan? All right, I will entertain a motion to close the hearing.
Sparks here. I make a motion to close this hearing.
Do I have a second? And Matt, you can stop sharing your screen, please.
Oh, sorry about that.
Do I have a
Curtis.
second?
Curtis, second.
All in favor, Danielson, I.
Sparks, aye.
Boris, I,
Curtis, I.
Motion passes. Do I have a motion to issue an order of conditions with the conditions outlined in Megan's report in except that the unpermitted discharge will be to the 50-foot buffer zone?
Sparks here, so moved.
Second,
Boris,
all in favor, Danielson, I.
Sparks, aye.
Boris, I,
Curtis, I.
Declara.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Okay, I think Holmgren's office is done for tonight.
I think so. I am.
All right.
Have a
The
good
next
night,
item,
everybody.
thank
Good
you
night.
very much, Matt. The next item on the agenda is a notice of intent for 159 Torrey Street, Thorny Lea.
They requested a continuance to the April 20th meeting while they
That's
work
right.
on providing the surveyed plan and getting the resource areas flagged.
Great. Do I have a motion to continue this hearing to April 20th?
I move to continue the hearing to April 20th for
Do I
Thorny
have a
Lake.
second?
Sparks here, I second.
All in favor? Yes, all in favor, Danielson, I.
Sparks, aye.
Forsyth,
Curtis, I.
Equal I.
And I think I said Danielson, I. Motion passes. Losing track. All right. The next item on the agenda is 30 Goldfinch Drive.
Okay.
And did we have anything new on this one, Megan?
Yes, I did have enough time to update my report.
Do we have anyone here for that?
Yes,
have
good
moved-
evening,
yep.
members of the commission. Brad Holmes here on behalf of 30 Goldfinch Drive.
Good evening, Brad. How are you?
Good evening. We were here at last meeting a month ago and presented the application for a proposed pool within the buffer zone at 30 Goldfinch Drive Lane, I think it is. Sorry. We did get a chance to take into account the comments the commission had and revise the plan and provide more detail and get the plan submitted to the commission. And we have been able to coordinate with Megan, and I think we're been able to nail down the items that the commission is looking for. If you get a chance to see the plan, you'll see that the proposed pool is an above ground pool set into the grade of the land. There'll be some existing stone retaining wall work, and some included with that will be some Japanese knotweed removal work. I think I'll leave it at that. I think we've been able to address most of the comments, and I know you have other things to talk about.
So Megan, would you like to summarize your report, please?
Yes, so based on the revised plans, I think my comments have been addressed. I think the one that was remaining from the last meeting was getting that cross section of the pool, because I think early on it was described as an in-ground pool, so it was a little confusing how the grading and the retaining wall worked relative to the pool. But I think with the cross section and clarifying that it's technically more of an above ground pool, and that's why you can have it sort of going from the existing retaining wall with the deck on top and then the little bit of grading for the corner makes sense to me now, whereas it didn't when I thought it was somehow in ground with the current elevation shown. So the difference with this one compared to the other pool, this one does have the knotweed in the proposed work area. So I think there's, some justification for having that work area because they can excavate out the knotweed before they put the pool in. It's currently a small area of knotweed. So there is potential for getting it excavated out as part of this. So in terms of recommending special conditions, again, our standard special conditions, and then for additional special conditions specific to the knotweed removal by mechanical methods with a monitor to oversee and report to the commission for the knotweed removal and supervision of the erosion controls, that the soil stockpiling and any dewatering shall occur outside the 50-foot buffer zone, which was consistent with what we were shown at the last meeting anyway. But just to reiterate, hopefully this one shouldn't need much, if any, dewatering because it's not a full in-ground pool. So, and based on the current elevation, I would think dewatering wouldn't be as much of a possibility here, but just to mention it anyway. that we're not requiring planting because the original limit of work was not within the 25-foot and will still not be within the 25-foot. So I don't think we need to require plantings, but I would recommend a condition that any plantings on the property be taken from the native list of resource buffer zone and tree shrubs list that was provided. And then the same as the previous, that pool water shall not be discharged into the BVW or buffer zone. Again, they're proposing to use the same filter, but I would think the same would apply, that it should be conditioned the same way, assuming it's going to be the same type of pool maintenance.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the commissioners? Okay, do I have a motion?
I couldn't get my mic to work. So that proposed erosion control, is that permanent or is that just for during the building?
During the building, it would be a silt sock installed, and then once everything stabilized, we'll slit the fabric and spread the mulch. It won't be.
So
permanent.
is there anything that could be used as a permanent sort of barrier around the pool, just, you know, to protect from the general use of a pool, things that it's going to happen. So like, can the area be like well mulched, well drained, or some sort of filtering?
I think on the backside of that pool is going to be that there's going to be about a 4 to 5 foot difference, so that you'd have to really work at getting in and around the back of that to make any disturbance to the land. And you know, any soils that would be disturbed would be stabilized with a seed mix. So I don't know if we would need anything more robust than that.
Very good.
I think it's confusing, but I think we think about it as that towards the house, the pool will sort of be at grade, but by understanding as you move back, you know, towards the limit of work, it's essentially going to be an above ground pool and deck, meaning that I would assume there's not going to be anyone or anything on the ground, you know, behind the pool. They'll be like on an elevated deck when they're going around the pool. And I assume once it's stabilized and seated, probably no one's going to be spending much time like underneath the deck, I would assume. So I don't know if that addresses, Bonnie, your concern about like activity spreading from the pool off, you know, but yeah.
No, that was not at all my intention. It was just more to help filter any water that ends up out of the pool before it goes towards the wetlands. Because I mean, just natural use of a pool will cause spillage. And so that area right there is on a downgrade. And that water is going to downgrade into just by how that works. And so I didn't know if there could be something there that just helps mitigate that.
And Megan, markers at the limit of, we require markers as a standard order, condition in any order, right?
It ends up E2, so E1 is no pesticides, no herbicides. E2 is markers, and then, you know, E3 and so on tends to be any additional continuing conditions. So in this case, E3 would be, you know, the no discharge of pool water.
Right. All right, any other questions, comments? Any members of the public here for this hearing? I see no hands. Do I have a motion to close the hearing?
Move to close the hearing, Boris.
Do I have a second?
Parks here, a second.
All in favor, Danielson, aye.
Parks, aye.
Boris, aye.
Curtis, I.
Pickler,
Motion passes. Do I have a motion to issue an order of conditions with the conditions outlined in our agent's report.
Parks here, so moved.
Do I have a second?
Second Forrest.
All in favor, Danielson, aye.
Parks, aye.
Forrest, aye.
Curtis, I.
Pickler,
Is that it? Motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Good night.
Good night. The next item on the agenda is a notice of intent for 455 Oak Street. Oh, shoot. Do you have anyone here for that? Oh, I thought I shut down my drive. All right. Megan, this is a new hearing, correct?
Yes.
And did we receive notice of a butter notification, confirmation of a butter notification?
Yes, we have a butter notification and we have the file number.
Okay. So, Mr. Powers, if you would like to present your project.
Sure. Can everybody hear me okay? Coming through all right?
Yes.
Great. And I can share a screen here. I just have a brief color plan. Make sure I got the right one. Oops. Share. Okay. Just something to point out. So my name is Tim Power with PVI Site Design, civil engineer in Massachusetts. On the call with us tonight as well are Steve Bernstein, who is an engineer with the SLB Group, acting as a sort of the owner's rep, and Paul Tantillo, representative from the Fuller Craft Museum. This project is really was initiated by some need for drainage repair and pavement repair. So we're looking at this as an overall repair of existing problems and a paving job. And I'll sort of walk you through what those are. The color plan you're looking at is almost the same as the layout plan that was in the plan set. The site is located in very close proximity to the upper pond. You can see it there shown in blue on the color. You can see the back of the building is very close to what's actually there. Back of the building may look a little different to that. Our survey didn't quite reach there, so it's a little bit, maybe a little bit different shape, but that's just to represent where we are. There's some wetlands to the northwest a little bit, connected to the pond as a bordering vegetated wetland. And then to the far west side, there's actually an isolated land. We think that's an isolated land subject to flooding. It was mislabeled on the plan as a bordering vegetated wetland, but that is isolated. And then you can see the little small green area just to the east of the larger wetland. It's sort of inside the drive aisle. It's a small isolated area of wetlands. So today, I'm going to talk about that dark gray parking area close to the building. The dark gray is parking that we're going to do sort of a full depth reconstruction. The orange on the screen is obviously the building. And you can see the rest of the parking area has sort of a dot hatch across it, just so you can follow along. Today, the dark gray area is subject to some substantial flooding. When it rains, even on reasonable rainstorms, there's 2 catch basins there that quickly surcharge, and almost the entire area becomes a large pond. These 2 catch basins do flow around the building and directly to the upper pond today. It takes quite a while to drain. It stays there for a while, so it really limits the use of that entry. That entry is both the handicap access into the building for patrons going, and also they use it for field trips and buses. So it's sort of almost a primary entrance for these patrons. So what we're proposing is to improve the drainage there and try to move the puddle, so to speak. In the dark gray, we're going to do a full depth reconstruction and we're going to raise the grade and sort of change the pitch. Today it pitches generally from north to south to where the two catch basins are. We're going to tip it the other way so it pitches towards the building, and we proposed a large rain garden right in between the building and the parking area. So the water will, rather than go to the two catch basins and flow directly to the pond, it'll go directly into the rain garden where it'll be held back and released slowly, like a detention basin system. That's the biggest focus of this project. The rest of it, we'd also like to do a mill and overlay of the rest of the parking. It's in quite a bit of disrepair, some very large potholes and deteriorated pavement. Where we can, we have proposed to sort of make the parking more efficient, where we regain some landscaped area. So there is overall a net reduction in impervious area from this site as part of this project. Last piece I want to talk about, or a couple quick pieces, but on the plan, you can see just near the edge of the parking and the building is sort of this L-shaped that says future addition. There is no building addition planned at this time. However, because we were looking at drainage improvements, we talked to the museum. Some point in the future, they may look to expand some storage rooms or other area of the museum. So we've included that small amount in our calculations that goes to the rain garden, because any runoff from that future roof will probably go overland to that rain garden. So just want to make that clear that there's no building additions planned right now, but we sized our rain garden to accommodate that in the future, if and when it ever happens. There's one piece. Another part of this notice of intent is there are a number of trees that are hazard trees that are unsafe given the public nature of this site. They're identified on one of the plans that I can bring up if we'd like to go over in detail. And the applicant would just like to remove these due to safety. I don't think the intent is to grind the stump. It's really just to remove the hazard of the tree falling down. So a limited disturbance to the grounds while they're doing that work. Those are the biggest items. I've prepared a full drainage report. It has been reviewed by Beta. We were in receipt of the comment letter, which we intend to respond. We did get the comments from the agent as well. Our plan is to obviously give this presentation now, find out any other comments or concerns from the commission. We will go back, revise the plans, incorporate all the comments, prepare a response letter, and send in revised documents. And hopefully at the next hearing or the next, when appropriate, we can talk about closing it and approving it. So we know we have a little more work based on the comments, but we wanted to get this in front of the commission and present the project.
Megan, would you go over your comments, please? Your report?
Sure. So I was out at the site with Phil from Beta Group on March 7th. So while he was looking at the drainage, I reviewed the wetland resource areas. My only comment is relative to what's called in the narrative, the isolated land subject to flooding on the western side. It's flagging series IEB. It is shown on the plan set as being BVW, and it has buffer zones as BVW. So I would ask that if it is indeed isolated land subject to flooding, we should be able to see all the flags on the plan, and the flags should enclose the entire area to confirm that it is isolated. Based on what I saw out in the field, I did find the flags. The western flags, as far as I could see, were not labeled, but I assumed they had to be the series shown on the plan based on their location. But if it is shown to be isolated land subject to flooding, it should be identified as such, and then it wouldn't have buffer zones under the Wetlands Protection Act. Also, and I think these comments are also reflected in Beta's report. Although the drainage improvements are mostly provided or proposed for that northwestern parking lot. We did note that there is currently no infrastructure in the southeastern lot, and that is the lot that is currently graded towards the pond. And I know as part of the work there, they are proposing converting some of the existing pavement into landscaping areas. So my suggestion would be, if it's possible, to expand those landscaping areas to restore the 25-foot buffer zone, because historically that parking lot does encroach into the 25-foot buffer zone to the bank of the pond. And sort of going into that as well, that because there's currently no runoff treatment for that southeastern lot, if there are best management practices or improvements that could be made for pre-treatment, to the extent practicable for that southeastern lot, again, considering how close it is to the pond and the fact that it is currently graded to direct runoff into the pond. It doesn't have catch basins. It's actually lower than Oak Street. So we can assume most of that runoff is not ending up in the city's drainage system. It goes overland and ends up in the pond. And then my other comments just have to do with details with some of the accessory work. So there's a detail on the plan about clearing debris from the driveway shoulders. And I just wanted to clarify what that would entail, because some of the driveway shoulders, particularly on the west, come right up to the resource area boundaries. So just clarifying, what are the methods for removing debris? Are we talking about hand sweeping the shoulders? Or are we talking about, pruning of vegetation and so on? And then also the details for the tree removal. We have the locations of the trees shown, and a couple of them in particular, there's a couple shown sort of right at the bank, sort of towards the northeastern side of the site. So right along the pond, kind of a ways away from the driveway. So looking just for some details of how the trees will be accessed and how they can be removed in order to avoid ground disturbance, and then removal of any surrounding vegetation, again, particularly related to those couple trees that are right at the bank or are not, obviously right beside a driveway where presumably it's going to be more difficult to get to them. So if we have a plan in place of how they can be accessed, hopefully without having to cut understory or cut any surrounding vegetation, or just accessing them with heavy equipment. And then, yeah, and finally, just echoing Beta Group's comments again of, for the rain garden, if we could sort of see the breakdown of what is the TSS percentage removal for the rain garden pre-treatment, just noting that it looks like the garden does have an overflow for, very significant rain events, in which case it would basically be going from the parking lot over the pre-treatment into the basin, and in overflow events, it's not going to have much time to settle in the rain garden itself before it overflows. So if we could sort of get the breakdown of what amount of the TSS removal comes from the pre-treatment strip versus settling in the rain garden itself, just to confirm that, water that's going to reach the BVW will not negatively impact the water quality. And so I think that is everything from my report. And then I know, Beta provided their comment letter as well. Similar comments about the pre-treatment, and I know they had some more specific comments related to the design specs of the rain garden that sort of is more on the engineering side of it.
Okay, thank you, Megan. Commissioners, any questions?
I have a question regarding the rain garden. if the runoff from the driveway is too fast for the rain garden, where does the water go afterwards?
Through the chair, happy to respond. So the rain garden is actually, I might bring up the profile here. Did everyone see the change in screen? Or is it still the same plan? Okay.
No, we can see it.
Okay, so this is, we changed the angle a little bit. This is at the bottom of the screen. You see the dark gray parking area we're speaking of. The building here with the crosshatch to the top of the plan view. At the this one I'm highlighting now in red is the cross section that matches the direction. So what happens is as the water comes off the pavement, it's going to go in the rain garden, and it's actually rain garden. The wetland is on this side of this. And so really what happens is all the water will pitch away from the wetland first and collect in the rain garden prior to overflowing and going into the wetland. So even in larger storms, it's going to go into this rain garden and flow down to the low spot. And then if we're in much larger storms, then we have overflow. So really it's designed to push the water away from the wetland first and then allow it to overflow over to the wetland.
Is there a possibility that the building will flood?
No, we specifically looked at all the spot grades along the wetlands and at the building for that specific reason. So it might be a little bit of sensitive work designing that overflow to make sure we get there. But the spot grade of the building at the building corner will be higher than the overflow. And then on top of that, there is a little bit of reveal of foundation, I believe, just a little bit, but it's there. So even if it did touch the building, it's got to go up another few inches before it goes in the building.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? And I can't, let's see, I have to scroll down to see everybody, if anyone has their hand raised. Joyce?
I was just curious to see, could you show the map of the hazard trees? Do you have that available?
Yes. Okay.
Can you
Not
zoom in
quite.
a little?
Yep. Give me one. So the X marks the spot on this, right? So if you can see some of these X's here, I'm going to zoom out a little more just so you can get the whole context of where they are. And I will try to highlight them quickly as I go. So here's some that are right next to the pond. I'll start with the worst ones. Oops. I might not be able to highlight them all as I go.
It's okay.
I think we,
I have a question about the dead trees. Are we checking them for any diseases or pests that? cause them to die?
Peggy, could we
Yes.
let Joyce finish her question? I think
Oh,
she may have had
sure.
a follow-up to that.
Okay,
Joyce, did you have a
Yeah,
follow-up?
are they both dead or just that second number 18? Are they both dead?
They're both dead. So anywhere you see an
X.
X are dead trees we'd like to take down. So
Okay, good.
there's the two there, but then there's some inside the property or away from the edge.
Okay, so pretty much they're all dead trees. They're not things that are actually anchoring the bank or anything like that.
No, this area is very wooded on this side, outside of the drive through the drop off. So there's lots of trees to remain. These are just ones that the owner walked and identified as hazard trees.
You all set, Joyce?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Peggy?
thank you. To reiterate my question, the dead trees, they being tested for any pests that cause the trees to die, like the Asian longhorn beetle or anything like that? And what happens with these trees after they're removed?
So I don't know about the pests, and I can certainly follow up. I'm not sure if either Steve or Paul, who are with us, can maybe jump in. When they're taken down and removed, I think the plan was just to remove them from the site. I do know that dead trees sometimes offer buffer zone enhancements. If the commission wanted us to cut one down and leave part of it there, I'm sure the owner's happy to discuss it. It's a little bit less cost on them. But at the moment, it was to cut it down and remove it from the site.
I would actually like to speak on that really quick. This is just considering that it is an art museum. Maybe they could offer up the logs to an artist to make something, be it furniture or chainsaw artist, but local artist the same. And then it deals with the loss of the trees. The trees are from the area. It's all a nice community project. And it wouldn't cost anything.
I'm sure, I don't want to speak for the museum, but knowing what's there, I'm sure they'd be happy to take that on and try to find someone to do that.
Peggy, do you have any other questions?
No, that's it. Thank you.
All right, anyone else? Bonnie?
No, that was it. Just art trees.
I have a question regarding the rain garden. So the water flows and the suspended solids settle down into that low spot, correct?
Yes.
How frequently does that need to be cleaned out to maintain the effectiveness of the pond, of the rain garden, I'm sorry?
Sure. So my opinion is, I mean, it does depend on the loading, right? So I think what we do is we have to evaluate it on a quarterly or annual basis at first to see how much sediment it's really getting. The planting that goes into a rain garden can sometimes help to hold that in place. You know, it's not like a basin where you leave it grass and you mow it. It's intended to have planting in there, helps pull out pollutants. The plants help with the treatment. And then they also help to break up sediment. So if a real thick sediment gets in there, the plants come up and the roots tend to continue to break it up and allow water to infiltrate rather than just keep building and building like you'd see in a typical forebay for a detention pond. So to that end, I think it's something we would have to monitor. But I'd say, we'd at least check, maybe quarterly during the first year. After the first year, it might be annually that a landscaper has to go in and even just till it and reseed it. But I think when it starts to lose its effectiveness, when you get 6 inches of material down there, now you have to regrade it to what it used to be. Otherwise, you may not notice. If it's a low sediment load, it may just get overgrown and you may not notice the creep, so to speak. So it's good to check it maybe in 5 years, make sure you haven't lost a lot of volume.
So Megan, your report was so comprehensive. One of the things we'll be requiring is an operations and maintenance plan for the garden. And I think included in that, I think even with traditional stormwater structures, kind of the training is overlooked, but certainly there will need to be some training for the Fuller Craft staff that's responsible for, unless the plan requires that they have professionals come in and evaluate the function of the rain garden on a regular basis. But there needs to be something in there to assure that that assessment is done on a regular basis and the garden gets maintained. I personally love the idea of rain gardens. I've seen them work very effectively. They do need maintenance, not extraordinary, but they do need it. I don't have any other questions. If you have no other questions from the commissioners, I will.
Joyce has her hand up.
Yep, one last, Tim, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, you had the vegetated areas that were going to be replacing part of the parking lot on the tree map, I believe. Where did I, yeah, right there. These the little hatch marks around it, that was going to become vegetated, is that correct?
Correct. That's all pavement today and doesn't really square off with parking spaces. So we're going to cut it and
Right,
just restore that to landscape.
so it won't be rain gardens though, right? It's just going to be permeable surface, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay,
I will say one of the comments, I forget if it was from the agent or Beta, was to see if we could reconfigure that a little more to get all of the pavement out of the 25-foot buffer.
yeah,
And I think if we have that, we'll have a little more space. Maybe we can at least make a little, gravel swale to catch and hold it. It won't be much, but it'll be better than nothing, which is what's there today.
and again, with maintenance, maybe perhaps to keep an eye on it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have one more question. Do you happen
Okay.
to know what plants are put in the rain garden? And are they native to the area?
We have on this enlargement sheet some recommended plantings. I don't know off the top of my head if all of these are native. When I asked the landscape architects for recommended ones, who is very good at picking native. She knows that's a very hot topic everywhere in all commissions in Massachusetts. So happy to revise this if the commission has any. Happy to talk to the agent after the fact if there's any that give concern or swap out what's needed. But
We're just concerned with any invasive species.
sure. I can circle back and maybe in one of our responses, we can note, give a little more detail to that.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, none from the commissioners. Any members of the public wish to be heard on this hearing? Seeing none, do I have a motion? Are you looking to continue to the 20th?
We are. I mean, if the commission is ready to vote, we'll obviously would go for it, but there's a lot of open items.
No,
so-
I think a lot of items were outlined that need to be addressed, right?
Sure. Yep, but I think the 20th, the next meeting is enough time for us to address it.
Okay, do I have a motion to continue to the 20th?
Sparks here, so moved.
Do I have a second?
For a second,
All in favor? And if, Timothy, if you could stop sharing your screen.
Yes.
All in favor, Danielson, aye?
Sparks, aye.
or side?
Oh, wait a minute, we're continuing, sorry. All right, motion passes.
Great.
Thank
Thank
you. Next item on the agenda is 466 Forest Street. Okay, Mr. Kelly, if you would like to discuss your project, introduce yourself for the record.
Sure, actually, Mike Jakes is going to do the introduction and then I'm going to come in after him. You're on mute, Mike.
I do it every time. Good evening. My name is Mike Jacques. I'm the Director of Facilities for the Brockton Neighborhood Health Center. I am here with our engineer, David Kelly from Meridian Associates. The Neighborhood Health Center has proposed the construction of a school-based health clinic located on the grounds of Brockton High School. It would be of modular construction, approximately 3,000 square feet, and reside southwest of the school's fine arts building. I'm going to turn things over to David. He can address any comments, questions, or concerns the commission might have.
Good evening, David Kelly, Meridian Associates. Little history on this. We had originally proposed this clinic to be on the eastern side of the school in a landscaped area near the gardens. It was brought to our attention by the school that there's a proposed addition potentially happening there within the next 5 years or so. So we have to find another place on site to construct this facility. The space that seemed most logical was the existing practice field on the southwest corner of the property from the Fine Arts Building. The area is completely grassed right now. It's maintained and mowed. It's used by the football team. It's used by the cheerleading squad as practice areas. What we're proposing, as Mike said, is approximately a 3,000 square foot building that is going to be on pilings, similar to as shown here. So there's no poured permanent foundation. These footings will be approximately 6 feet on center, located in a grid formation throughout the building. For utilities, electric tel data will cross the parking lot and connect into the existing building. The water line is right in front of the proposed building in the drive aisle, so connecting into there. Sanitary sewer, we will be going from gravity from the building into a 1,000 gallon pump chamber tank and then pumping it south to an existing manhole down near the pool building. For stormwater management, we are proposing a subsurface infiltration system to the northwest of the proposed building. This will handle the runoff from the roof, the clean runoff from the rooftop of the proposed building. We are adding an additional sidewalk across the front with a couple of ramps to get up into the building and a set of stairs on the side to get in from the other entrance. We are proposing some landscaping around the building consisting of red maples and either eastern red cedars or white pine or white spruce. We have added a stockpile location here as requested by Beta. A couple of their other questions were pertaining to the stormwater report. When we did the initial stormwater calculations, we basically just modeled this very small area here, showing that the addition of the building will not increase any stormwater rates of runoff. They wanted us to have the catchment area be much larger than we originally modeled. And Megan, we sent that over to you probably about an hour or so ago. Our drainage area went from approximately 2,800 square feet as a modeled area. And in the new report that was sent over earlier this evening, we adjusted that to about 28,000 square feet. In doing so, we still show that there is a net reduction in the peak rate of runoff for the storm events. Additionally, we have provided the illicit discharge compliance statement that was requested by Beta that was not submitted yesterday with the rest of the packet. The other concern that Beta had outstanding was with potential shallow groundwater in the area of the infiltration system. We had done some borings from a structural standpoint for the location of the building and did find that there was groundwater. The system that we're proposing now uses 30-inch tall chambers. And our intent was to, prior to construction, when we start digging the hole, if we encounter groundwater shallower than we anticipated, to modify that system to use 12-inch tall chambers, which would provide an additional 18 inches of separation to groundwater. And therefore it would, should satisfy Beta and would allow the system to function properly. We've gone before tech review. Tech review had no outstanding issues with this. Their only comment from the prior design on the eastern side of the building was with the sewer and how that was configured. And then with the infiltration system, they wanted some sort of an overflow in the way that what they recommended was a beehive grate over one of the chambers so that should the system meet capacity, it will slowly come out of the beehive grate and then dissipate over the land at a nice even clip and prevent any running, rilling, or ruts across the lawn and would not create any potential erosion reaching the resource areas. Around all of the work, we have proposed silt socks which will be in place and maintained during the entire construction process and will not be removed until a certificate of compliance is requested and approved from the commission. The areas that are disturbed via the lawn would be seeded with a starter fertilizer, and no fertilizers are to be stored on site. And we say, if needed, pesticides and herbicides shall be applied in the minimum amounts recommended. But based on what I was hearing from you folks tonight, a condition of pesticides and herbicides shall not be used is completely fine with us as the project team. The building is approximately 55 feet from the resource area. Up in this top northwest corner, the erosion control is just outside the 20-foot no touch. We just wanted to expand that as much as possible so that we can grade the area down and get some new grass around the building and really make this thing look nice and make it receiving for the students and the folks that will be utilizing this facility. So with that, I think we have addressed Beta's latest comments from their letter that came in late this afternoon. And their previous comments from the letter last week had been addressed. And I would like to see if there's anyone on the commission that has any questions.
The chair would like to see if anyone on the commission has any questions for you.
I have a question.
I have a
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, Peggy, I'll go right to you. I think that was Peggy.
Yes.
So my initial question is, you said you have responded to Beta's comments, and if I understood you correctly, those were all responded to this afternoon?
So we received a letter from them dated the 10th, I believe. We responded to those and submitted our updated plans and documentation yesterday. We received a letter around 4 o'clock this afternoon from Beta with still a couple outstanding questions. And we submitted we didn't submit a formal response letter, but we provided the documentation that responds to their comments to Megan around 6:30 tonight.
Right. So Beta has not had a chance to do a final review and sign off. I just wanted to make sure I was clear on that. Peggy?
Yes, I was wondering where the parking lot was for this building.
So Mike can probably help me with this one. This is basically to be used by the students, correct, Mike?
Yes, it's used by the students, and we would be sharing the parking lot with the school. The parking lot's located directly west of the Fine Arts Building. It's the large lot. You can see some of the hatch lines. Nick, could you move your cursor up a little?
So I think what Peggy is asking is, and you answered it in part, is how are the people accessing the building getting to it if they're using the central parking?
Sure. So
Okay.
say if they're coming to this building from the school, they will come out the entrance from the Fine Arts Building, walk along the concrete sidewalk, cross the proposed crosswalk that we are as part of this project, and then either enter via the stairs on the side or come up the ramp and enter the front.
Peggy, does that answer your question?
In part, this building, will it ever be used for the public? It seems like a large building for just student use.
No, it would never be used for the general public. It is solely for the students of Brockton. We're starting off with the high school students, but the school committee had expressed interest in us taking in other students for services as needed in the future. It consists of 3 exam rooms and 3 counseling rooms. We would have a nurse practitioner on site for the students for the exam rooms, and we'd have a couple behavioral health counselors on site to take care of the students in the counseling rooms.
Thank you.
Okay, are you all set, Peggy? Any
Yes,
other?
I'm all set.
Okay, any other questions from the commissioners?
Hey, Stephanie,
Yes,
hi, Joyce.
yeah,
A comment first. I taught at the high school for 20 years and I do have to say, thank God it's finally coming. It really is nice to see that there will be a health center there. There's over 4,000 kids there. So the need is really pretty profound. So I'm really happy to see that. The location, interesting. You mentioned something about you would grade the area down here, like in the corner of the proposed area. Will that cause everything to kind of drain towards the resource area? Do you expect that grading to be going toward the resource area?
No, we just wanted to create a nice buffer around the building with some new seating, new grass, just so when you're approaching the building from the parking lot from the school, the whole thing's very inviting. It doesn't look like we just stuck it in this small little square.
Sure.
And you have nice new grass, and then all of a sudden there's just football field grass next to it. So we just wanted to.
I would anticipate that it's going to be it's kind of a juggling act, I think, because there's a lot of real erosion in that parking lot from standing water as well as wetlands on the other side. So I'm not sure how all of that will be juggled. So that way the parking lot doesn't get even more eroded and the more sensitive areas as far as the wetlands are concerned are affected. So I'm not sure exactly how that will work. It would be interesting to see how that grading will be done.
Yeah, it's pretty flat in that area. By taking the roof runoff, we're basically taking 95% of the impervious area that's being proposed and putting it into an infiltration system, which would prevent any runoff, which could cause some erosion to the rear of the site along the wetlands.
Okay, it's difficult to see what the different height topographical values are. I can't really tell here, but okay, I'll look into it more later. Thank you.
You're welcome.
okay, anybody else have questions, comments? Okay, that's interesting. And it doesn't look like we have any other attendees. So it doesn't look like there are any members of the public who would care to comment. So Megan, in your report, one of the things you were looking for was the detail of the foundation. Has that been satisfied? And I do have a question about this, maybe before Megan answers. Does this sit at grade, this base that you're showing? And then the building kind of sits on top of the column, or is this below grade?
So a portion of this concrete footing is below grade. Then steel I-beams are placed on top of these, running linearly across the grid, and then the building is placed and mounted to that steel I-beam system.
So I'm assuming that the footing is below the frost line.
Correct.
Set below the frost line, okay. And that all gets reviewed and approved by the building department.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, and I can see the steel. So Megan, does that address your comment?
Yes, so the request for the foundation details was from my report last week. This detail was provided on the plans we received this morning. So that does address, I think that was my one comment, was to get this detail. So yes, this was on the plans we received today.
Okay. And again, the comments that are do we need to wait for Beta to review the information? I mean, I think that's a statement more than a question. We need Beta to review the final response to their second round of comments before closing.
I'm looking quickly. So Beta provided their comment letter last week. They did provide a follow-up comment letter today. So the outstanding comments from this afternoon were the test pits, details for the O&M plan, the illicit discharge statement. So I think, and then what we received around 6:30, I've just barely glanced at it because it
Yeah.
came in during the meeting. So
Right,
Beta hasn't
right.
looked at it, but we have the illicit discharge statement. We have the redone storm calculations with the bigger watershed.
Yeah,
So I think the outstanding comments, I don't want to speak for Beta, would be the test pits and the O&M plan. I think the test pits are pretty self-explanatory. It's the matter of, I know the commission generally doesn't like to condition test pits. In terms of the O&M plan, I think we received an O&M sort of plan sheet earlier today, and I think Beta Group's comment was they wanted more details, I think, in terms of like the narrative and the budget and for maintenance costs.
mhm.
So I'm not, again, I don't want to speak for them to say that that's been addressed. But I
Right,
would
so we
say
should
also the other
definitely-
thing is we should probably sort out the test pit question that,
Yes,
if the commission is not going to make the test pits part of the order of conditions, we should probably decide that now, because I assume that's going to continue to be in Beta's report.
yes,
Yeah, as far as the detailed O&M plan, that with the narratives, et cetera, that was submitted with the original submittal. It was in the back of the stormwater report, and we just don't, we think that Beta just didn't catch that. We did not have a budget and it was not signed, but typically we would sign and put a budget to those once everything's approved, and then provide a final copy to the commission for their records.
And I think also just knowing from other projects, usually Beta's comment says they want it as a standalone O&M plan. So
Yep.
when it's in the sort of the whole stormwater report, they also like to see it taken out and provided as a standalone document. I think the reasoning for that being is that going forward, people don't want to be handing out or sending the whole PDF of the entire stormwater report,
Right.
to the managers and so forth.
right,
So I
because
think
they're not
that's-
going to
yeah.
get to it.
Yeah, so I think just still for clarity in the maintenance, I think that's why Beta asks for a standalone O&M plan, because the idea being it's the ready-made document and that's what's going to be, given to the managers, or we assume whoever the chain of command is in the O&M plan. The idea is to give them that separate PDF or that separate copy rather than giving them. the
And
stormwater
that's
report.
pretty standard from any peer reviewer, in my experience. So and what about the test pits? Mr. Kelly?
So what we had, as I explained in my initial narrative, we designed the system with very tall infiltration chambers to minimize the footprint. Once we get into the ground, if we determine the groundwater is higher than we had anticipated based on soils records, et cetera, then we can go to a smaller chamber and just increase the footprint of it. And we could submit that as a minor change and, run that by Beta at the time.
Why wouldn't you do the test pits now so we can get this confirmed and out of the way? Mr. Kelly?
I know I'm, because we had done borings out there for where the building itself is going. And in the reports that we got from them, they encountered groundwater, but it wasn't as high as people thought it was. So that's why we didn't bother, because the results that we got from the borings showed that this system should work.
Were the results of those borings provided to Beta?
No, they were not.
And why wouldn't they be, so that that could be resolved?
I can provide those to Beta and get that resolved.
Because as Megan indicated, that's probably something they'll continue to push on.
Yep.
So I think we should continue until Beta has had an opportunity and to look through what was submitted tonight.
There's no way to make that a condition.
No, and it's the lateness of even submitting it and then talking about it in the meeting is just I find a little disturbing, because no one on our end could possibly have had time to look at those documents ahead of tonight's meeting.
That's fair. We were just kind of had my fingers crossed and hoping for the best.
Okay, do I have a motion to continue this hearing until April 20th?
Horace here, motion to continue.
Do I have a second?
Parks here, I second.
And Mr. Kelly, if you could stop sharing your screen so I can see everyone. All in favor, Danielson, aye.
Parks, aye.
Horace, aye.
Curtis, I.
Pickler eye.
All right, motion passes.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome. The
Thank
next
you.
item on, you're welcome. The next item on the agenda is a notice of intent for Massasoit Boulevard, 290 Thatcher Street.
Hi, good evening. My name is Molly Lennon. I'm with TRC and I'm representing Massachusetts Electric Company tonight. We are proposing to install electrical equipment along the side of Massasoit Boulevard in order to fix the streetlights along the roadside there that have been having voltage issues. Massasoit Community College reported to us that the existing streetlights there have been flickering and then turning off at night, which is creating a safety hazard for pedestrians, bikers, and cars. So Massachusetts Electric Company went out and discovered that there's just not enough power feeding the streetlights with the current underground electric system. So the electric infrastructure there needs to be upgraded and new equipment needs to be installed. So some proposed work involves the installation of a new transformer box with 2 bollards that would be placed right next to the box in case any cars decide to go off the road. And then it would involve the installation of 9 handholds, which would be installed in the ground right next to the base of the streetlights. And then a conduit would be installed connecting the streetlights to the transformer box. Most of this work is subject to Wetlands Protection Act because various portions of the work lie within buffer zone bordering land subject to flooding and riverfront area. But none of this proposed work would take place within wetlands or streams. Let me can share my screen. Here are just a couple pictures of the existing conditions at the site. So all the proposed work would be taking place in this mowed grassy area right along the side of the road. And then there's this no-mow area farther away from the road that we wouldn't be touching. And then in the trees, there is Beaver Brook. And there's also a wetland in a portion of the no-mow area right there. So last month, TRC conducted a delineation at the site where we took GPS points and hung flags along the wetland boundary and top of bank on Beaver Brook. And based off the results of the delineation, we were able to determine the impacts, temporary and permanent impacts that the project would have. So we just sent you all earlier today an updated figure 2 here that is just more zoomed in and shows a lot more detail of the site. So we have Beaver Brook over here to the east of the site, pretty much running parallel to Massasoit Boulevard. And there's a couple areas where it dips out where culverts pop out from under Massasoit Boulevard. We also delineated this bordering vegetated wetland that comes off the side of Beaver Brook here. And all the proposed work would be taking place away from Beaver Brook and the wetland here, but it would be taking place within the buffer zones and a little bit within riverfront area and within this blue area, which is the bordering land subject to flooding. So the yellow line here shows the proposed route for the conduit. So it runs through the buffer zones and bordering land subject to flooding. And then it also runs through a little bit of riverfront area here where the stream pops out a little bit. And it also runs through just a sliver of riverfront area here as well. So the conduit itself would all be temporary impacts because we'd just be digging a trench that would be no more than 3 feet wide, installing the conduit and then covering it all back up with the same soil. So there wouldn't be any permanent above ground impacts.
I'm sorry, someone has some background talking going on and it's a little disruptive, so I don't know who that is. It looks like all of us are, it just stopped. But, okay. I'm sorry, Molly.
That's okay. Let me know if you need to speak up or anything. So we're also proposing to install the hand holes at right by the base of the streetlights here. And 7 of the hand holes would be within the areas under regulation. 2 of them are outside of any buffer zones. So those would be temporary impacts to bordering land subject to flooding, since they would be below ground with just a cover for access for future maintenance at ground level. And then they would also be permanent impact to the buffer zones. And none of the hand holes would be within the riverfront area here. We're also,
Molly, could you explain what a hand hold is?
yeah, so those are basically I think they're about 2.5 feet by 3.5 feet. And it's basically just a box that would be dug out and placed underground with a cover that can be removed for access to the conduit. So this would be placed right at the base of the streetlights, and that way any future maintenance wouldn't need to involve digging or anything like that. They could just remove the cover and access the conduit there.
Thank you.
Yep. And then we're proposing to install a new transformer pad with 2 bollards here. The transformer pad is pretty small. It's only about 4¼ feet by 4¾ feet or so. And that will tie into the conduit and provide power to the streetlights. So the location of the conduit should be installed as close as possible to the existing underground electric system. because it will need to tie into that and the existing streetlights. So because of this, the layout for the conduit is pretty limited to where we've proposed it to be. And due to these layout limitations, some disturbance is unavoidable within the regulated riverfront area and buffer zones and bordering land subject to flooding. But we've tried to design this in a way that would minimize any of these impacts to the regulated areas. We'd also follow National Grid's best management practices, which would involve adding erosion controls, which are shown here as the pink line. We'd install straw wattle or silt sock or something just along the entire work area, in between the work area and the stream and the wetland, or any other sensitive areas like storm drains or anything. So that runs all the way along here until we're out of the resource areas. Also at the end of construction, we'd restore any disturbed areas to pre-construction. We'd seed the area and lace down some straw so that the area is stabilized and return to pre-construction conditions. So we did submit a supplemental memo to Mass DEP and to you all earlier today, addressing a couple information requests from Mass DEP and addressing a few comments that were included in Megan's report. And this updated figure was also included in that memo as well. So we do not have a file number from Mass DEP yet because they just
Okay,
received
so
the
we
memo.
can't close the hearing
Uh,
then anyway tonight. Okay, Megan, would you like to go over your report?
Sure. So, yes, I can confirm. We did receive the supplemental in addition to these zoomed in figures. We also received a civil sketch. So I think my follow-up comment, just one thing I noticed was how the conduit connects to the transformer from the adjacent light poles appear. The civil sketch, it looks like they attach a bit differently than shown in the figure. So I wasn't sure if, and this would go in with the first comment originally, if there was some way to combine the civil sketch with these details into one plan, perhaps, just to clarify the placement of the conduits, because I know we have the resource areas were delineated and we have the locations of those and their buffer zones. We know where the light poles are, and this revised shows where the transformer is. So I think my only remaining question then would be comparing it to the civil sketch that was provided. It seems that the conduit is a little bit different on the civil sketch. So if there's a way to sort of combine the plans so that the civil sketch of the conduit matches, I think that would be helpful. And then my only other comments go in line with the supplementary information that was also requested by Mass DEP, because there is some work in the riverfront, the alternatives analysis to confirm that there is no practicable alternative to installing that stretch of conduit in the riverfront area. I think it has to do with, because of that head wall technically bumps the brook farther towards the road. And so I'm not sure what the alternative would be, unfortunately, because the head wall's so far out, it pushes the riverfront area into the street. So I'm not, I think for riverfront area, the practicable alternative would be tricky unless you move, everything onto the other side of the street entirely. That would be the only way to avoid that bump out. My other comment then was just determining whether we want to consider the impacts to bordering land subject to flooding as negligible, because basically we're looking at the conduit and then the transformer pad, which is about 200 square feet, I think, is being proposed as. So it's, the pad is going in the bordering land subject to flooding. So I think the commission needs to decide, does that pad meet the presumption of significance under bordering land subject to flooding? So is it filling floodplain in a way that has an incremental or significant impact on flood storage? And if it does, then compensatory storage would need to be provided. So I think the commission, should make that determination. Basically, it would be, do we want to see compensatory storage for that pad? And where would that compensatory storage go, and what would it entail? Because it would involve more ground disturbance. So I think that's the determination the commission would make, that presumption of significance. Does that pad have an effect on flood storage? And so I think those were, my three comments. The plans, the riverfront, is there a practicable alternative? It seems like probably not. And then just the determination of, is the impact to bordering land subject to flooding significant enough to require compensatory storage?
Thank you. Do any of the commissioners have questions? Okay, I have one. What I would like to see, I would prefer to see, and this plan you're showing here tonight is certainly much easier. It is easier to read than the plan that was included with your packet. But it's still hard to really get a sense of the areas with the aerial photograph underneath it. I would like to see a plan submitted that is a typical engineering plan.
Yeah, so National Grid doesn't typically create like surveyed engineered plans for these types of maintenance projects. So that's why.
So
we
was the
didn't
plan, does this plan show the wetland line located by survey? Are those points that are now
Yes.
added by survey?
Yeah, so these points right here are all labeled as they are in the field, and they were taken with the GPS. So yes, these are the wetland line and the stream line are all GPSed.
And then the buffer zones that are shown here, right? These are the
Mhm.
buffer zones.
Yep.
Are now located accurately based on the surveyed lines shown on the plan.
Yep, yeah.
So why couldn't this be displayed without the aerial photograph underneath?
Yeah, that's just how we have normally done our plans for these types of projects, but that can be removed in a different.
I mean, it would be, I don't know about Megan. Megan's doing the detailed review, but it is difficult to kind of really get a sense of what's going on and where the resource areas are.
Okay. I would say for me, my remaining concern again would just be about the conduit location. Again, comparing the civil sketch, how the conduit attaches to the pad is different between the two plans. So if there's either a way to get the conduit design from the civil sketch onto this plan or vice versa. I think that would address my concern at this point, but since the resource areas are flagged and surveyed, I feel like otherwise, I feel we can see where everything is. I think it's just the conduit I still have the question on.
Joyce?
Molly, I was just wondering, how exactly, where is that transformer sitting? Is it sitting on the surface of the soil, or is it located above in the air? Is it underground?
It would attach to the conduit would come up from underground into
Okay.
the transformer box. So the transformer box would just be sitting on the ground.
And
It's
how-
just a fiberglass box.
Is it level with the surface, or is it actually above ground?
It's above ground. Yeah, it's just a box that sits above ground, but due to the flood zone, they decided to raise it 2 additional feet to,
Okay,
in case a flood happens, and
right.
it
And
will
what did you
stay up.
say what did you say the dimensions of that transformer box were?
It's about 4 1/4 feet by 4 3/4 feet.
Okay, and then it will be an additional 2 feet above. Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Yep.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Okay, do I have a
I
motion to?
have a question, I'm sorry.
Okay, is that Peggy?
Yes, Peggy, yes.
Yep.
Is this a solar panel, Molly? Are there solar panels going to be installed?
No, there are no solar panels involved in this.
And that's not an option for these types of lights?
Yeah, that would involve replacing the structures themselves, which just would be a costly endeavor. And
And,
You think it would be oops, sorry, Peggy, I'm sorry.
no, it's okay. Go ahead, continue.
No, I was just going to say, you would think that the cost of electricity, the save would offset, the cost of replacing, or might offset that cost.
And there's going to be a trench being dug. What kind of equipment will you be using, and where will that equipment be, left or parked or whatever?
yeah, I believe for a conduit trench like this, it would just be an excavator. And then when they weren't using it, they would keep it in upland areas outside of any resource areas. So they'd probably likely store it maybe somewhere in the field or in this parking lot right here, depending on what the college agrees to.
And one last question, how long do you expect this project to take?
This should be a pretty quick project, I would guess, maybe several weeks worth of work. And then just stabilization after that.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, are we all set? And again, there are no members of the public. Do I have a motion to continue to April 20th?
So moved, Forrest.
Do I have a second?
Sparks, I second.
All in favor? And
Aye.
again, Molly, if you could stop, thank you. So Danielson, I,
Sparks, I.
Forrest, aye.
Curtis, I.
Winkler,
motion passes. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
The next item on the agenda is a notice of intent for 82 Ames Street.
So I received a request to continue to the April 20th meeting because we just received the check for the fee for Beta to do their stormwater review. So we just gave Beta the go-ahead to start their review. So the applicant's engineer wants to continue to the April meeting so that he has time to get the stormwater review. He prefers to respond to all the comments rather than respond to mine and then get Beta's. So he's requested a continuance to the April meeting.
Okay, do I have a motion to continue to April 20th?
So moved.
Second,
Second,
all in favor, Danielson, I.
Sparks, aye.
Forsyth,
Curtis, I.
Clara.
Motion passes. And we have a motion to continue the notice of intent for Pleasant Street. Is that correct, Megan?
Yes, they've requested to continue to the April 20th meeting.
Do I have a motion to continue map 003-049 Pleasant Street to April 20th?
so moved, Horace.
Second, second Curtis.
All in favor, Danielson, I.
Sparks, aye.
Forsyth,
Curtis, I.
Clara.
Motion passes. All right, so the last item on the agenda is the Wetlands Protection Ordinance Draft Update.
Okay, yes, so my reason for putting this on the agenda was while we had mostly everyone here, just to let everyone know, I made the revisions from our last meeting and they are in the ordinance folder under the drive. It's for clarity, because I know it can be hard to toggle the changes. I just made it as a separate document. So it's now called Ordinance Draft 2022, because that's where we're at now. So those changes that I made are in red text to make it easier to find them. So going from there, I also wanted to check in and see, does the commission want to schedule another meeting to discuss next steps, or how would you like to proceed now that we have a revised draft?
Board? Thoughts?
I think we need to, I would think that another meeting would be necessary, no?
Yeah. I think what Megan is asking, yes, I agree with that. And do we want to do it like we did the last one, which seemed to work really well because that was the focus of the meeting. It didn't get shifted to the end, and I thought we had a great discussion.
Agree?
All right, do we want to pick a date? What day of the week did we do that one on, Megan? Do you remember?
We did it Wednesday, March 2nd.
Okay.
So it would have been the first Wednesday of this month.
Didn't you have to take a survey, Megan, to find out whose schedules would, gel with
do that.
everybody else's?
Yeah, I could do that. I can send out another poll. It would also be helpful because I know Joanne wants to be involved. She's been having some trouble with the scheduling. So if you want, I can set it up as a poll again and then give our other members a chance to see if they can attend. And we can do it that way as well. And then I can confirm it via email and set it up if we have a consensus.
It sounds like a plan.
Okay.
All right. If there is nothing else, I would take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Sparks, aye.
Curtis,
all in favor, Danielson, I.
Sparks, aye.
Forsyth,
Curtis, I.
Clara.
All right, thank you, everybody.
bye.
Thank you.
Good night.
Right.